I stood at the entrance of the Gilded Oak, a restaurant where the napkins cost more than my father's first car. The air was thick with the scent of aged bourbon and expensive perfume. My family, the illustrious Brooks clan, was already seated at a long, candlelit table. My father, Richard, was at the head, leaning back with a glass of scotch in his hand, his face flushed with the kind of pride that usually only comes from belittling someone else. "And then there's Olivia," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "Still finding herself at 28. I suppose every family needs a cautionary tale, right?" The table erupted in a chorus of polite, jagged chuckles. My cousin Kelsey, the star of the evening, flicked her hair back, her 5-carat diamond catching the light like a weapon. Her fiancé, Mason Reed, a man whose family owned half the commercial real estate in the tri-state area, sat beside her, smiling that practiced, neutral smile of the ultra-wealthy. I didn't flinch. I had spent a decade training my face to be a mask of bored indifference. I walked toward the empty chair at the far end of the table, my heels clicking a steady, rhythmic beat on the marble floor. I wasn't wearing the designer labels they expected. I wore a charcoal suit, tailored but silent, and carried a leather bag with no visible logo. To them, I looked like a middle manager who had given up. To me, I looked like a woman who didn't need to scream to be heard. "Nice of you to join the winners for once, Olivia," my Aunt Denise said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "We were just talking about Kelsey's new penthouse. It's a shame you couldn't make the housewarming. But I suppose your consulting keeps you busy." She said the word consulting like it was a euphemism for being unemployed. "I'm working," I said simply, taking my seat. I didn't offer a defense. I didn't explain that my consulting involved fixing the catastrophic errors made by people exactly like her. "Working doesn't mean much when you're still a failure in every metric that counts," my father snapped. He didn't even look at me. He was busy trying to catch Mason's eye, desperate for the approval of a man half his age. Kelsey leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "Don't be mean, Dad. Olivia just has different priorities. Not everyone is meant for the high life. Some people are just meant to be background characters." I took a slow sip of water. I watched the way the light reflected off the silver. I felt the weight of the phone in my pocket, the phone that had been buzzing all morning with frantic messages from a board of directors in Chicago. I was the ghost in their machines, the silent operator who fixed the unfixable. And tonight, the ghost was tired of being haunted. The dinner was a calculated assault. Every course was served with a side of condescension. My brother Tyler made a comment about my tiny apartment. My mother, Sharon, whispered that maybe I should try a little harder with my makeup so I wouldn't look so tired. Through it all, I remained a statue. Then came the toast. Mason Reed stood up. He adjusted his silk tie, his presence commanding the room's attention. My father beamed, leaning forward like a devotee. "I want to thank the Brooks family for welcoming me," Mason began, his voice deep and authoritative. "Meeting Kelsey changed my life. She comes from a family that, well, a family that understands the value of legacy." My father practically purred. Kelsey squeezed Mason's hand, her face glowing with triumph. She looked at me across the table, a silent "I won" written in the curve of her lips. Mason's gaze traveled down the table, acknowledging each relative. He joked with Tyler. He praised Denise. And then, his eyes hit the end of the table. He stopped. The silence was immediate. It wasn't the silence of a pause for effect, it was the silence of a machine seizing up. Mason's glass hovered mid-air. His eyebrows pulled together, and the polished, neutral mask he wore shattered. He stared at me with a look of dawning, terrifying recognition. "Mason." Kelsey whispered, her smile faltering. "Babe, what is it?" He didn't answer her. He took a step toward my end of the table, his eyes locked on mine. The room grew cold. My father's hand tightened around his glass so hard I thought it might shatter. "Wait," Mason said, his voice no longer smooth. It was sharp. Professional. "I know you." Kelsey laughed, a high, nervous sound that grated on the ears. "Babe, of course you know her. That's Olivia. I told you, she's the one we don't really talk about." Mason ignored her. He was standing 3 feet from me now. "No. I don't know an Olivia Brooks. I know Vera." The name hit the table like a live grenade. My father's head snapped toward me. My mother gasped. Vera was the professional pseudonym I used for high-level crisis management, a name associated with a reputation for being ruthless, brilliant, and impossibly expensive. I'm sorry, my father stuttered. Her name is Olivia. She's a freelancer. She's had a very difficult time finding a stable career. Mason finally looked at my father, and for the first time, I saw the true weight of the man Kelsey was marrying. He looked at my father like he was a bug on a windshield. A difficult time. Mason repeated. He turned back to me, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and genuine confusion. 6 months ago, my father's firm was facing a 7-figure breach of contract in Chicago. The lawyers were useless. The executives were panicking. Our stocks were in free fall. He turned to the entire table, his voice rising. The board brought in a specialist. A woman who went by the name Vera. She walked into a room of 20 screaming men, silenced them in 30 seconds, and rewrote our entire negotiation strategy on a napkin. She saved us $40 million in a single night. Kelsey stood up, her face white. Mason, stop. You're confused. Olivia can't even pay her own phone bill half the time. She owns 20% of the firm she advised us through, Kelsey, Mason said, his voice deadly quiet. I know because I signed the commission check. It was for 7 figures. I've been trying to track her down for a follow-up contract for months, but her agency told me she was indisposed for family matters. The silence that followed was so absolute you could hear the wax dripping from the candles. My father looked like he was having a stroke. My mother was clutching her pearls so hard her knuckles were blue. I set my water glass down. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet. I wasn't indisposed, Mason, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. I was just attending a dinner where I was told I was a failure. Mason looked at my father, then back to me. The realization of what he had just walked into settled on him. He looked disgusted. You're the Brooks cautionary tale? Mason asked, a dark laugh escaping him. Mr. Brooks, if this woman is your failure, I'd love to see what you consider a success. Because from where I'm sitting, she's the only person in this room who actually knows how the world works. My father tried to speak, but only a pathetic, wheezing sound came out. Kelsey was shaking, her hand hovering over her engagement ring as if it might disappear. Olivia, my mother whispered, her voice trembling. Is this true? Why wouldn't you tell us? I looked at her, and for the first time, I let the mask slip. I let her see the years of exhaustion. I let her see the scars of 1,000 dinner table insults. Because every time I tried to talk about my life, you told me it was a phase, I said. Every time I showed you my success, you called it reckless. You didn't want a daughter who was a titan. You wanted a daughter you could look down on so you could feel better about your own plateau. I stood up. I didn't need to shout. The power in the room had shifted so violently that the very air felt different. Mason, I said, nodding to him. It was good to see you again. Your father's firm still owes me a final audit report. Tell him I'll have it on his desk by Monday. At my usual rate. Of course, Mason said, bowing his head slightly in a gesture of pure, unadulterated respect. Kelsey grabbed his arm. Mason, we're not leaving. This is our night. Mason looked at her, and the look was cold. Is it? Because I don't think I want to be part of a family that treats its most brilliant member like a stray dog. I think I need to reevaluate a few things. He didn't wait for her. He walked out of the restaurant, his stride purposeful. I looked at my father one last time. He was slumped in his chair, the king of the table now looking like a discarded pawn. I'm leaving, too, I said. As I walked toward the door, I felt my father's hand on my sleeve. He had followed me out into the lobby, away from the prying eyes of the guests. Olivia, wait, he said. He sounded small. I didn't know. We can fix this. Your mother and I, we want to be part of this. We want to help you manage all this wealth. I looked at the hand on my arm. It was the same hand that had pointed at me and called me a failure only an hour ago. You don't want to help me, Dad, I said, gently removing his hand. You want to ride the wave I built while you were busy trying to drown me. You don't get to be part of the empire when you spent 20 years trying to burn the blueprints. I'm your father, he hissed, his old temper flaring for a split second. Then act like one, I said. Stop looking for a payout and start looking for a mirror. I walked out into the cool night air. The valet brought my car around, a matte black sedan that cost more than Kelsey's engagement ring. I tipped him and slid into the leather seat, the scent of luxury finally matching the reality of my life. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Olivia, please come home. We're so sorry. We just wanted the best for you. I didn't reply. I had spent my whole life waiting for them to be proud of me. But as I pulled away from the restaurant, watching the gilded oak disappear in my rearview mirror, I realized something. I didn't need their pride. I had my own. The next morning, the trade journals carried the news of my firm's expansion. My name, my real name, was at the top of the masthead. My father called. My aunt called. Even Tyler sent a groveling message asking for an internship. I blocked them all. Months later, I saw Kelsey at a charity gala. She was alone. Mason had called off the engagement 3 weeks after that dinner. He had told her that he couldn't build a life with someone who built her confidence on the bones of her own sister. She looked at me from across the room, her eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and longing. I didn't go over to her. I didn't offer an olive branch. I simply raised my glass in a silent toast. Because the best revenge isn't watching them fail. It's letting them watch you succeed, knowing they had absolutely nothing to do with it. I am Olivia Brooks. I am Vera. And I am no longer a background character in someone else's story. I am the one who writes the checks. And tonight, the account is closed. If this story stirred something inside you, don't scroll away in silence. Tap like, it tells us these stories deserve to be told. Subscribe to Vengeful Goddess for unforgettable tales of betrayal, resilience, and justice, stories you won't hear anywhere else. Turn on the bell icon, so the next story reaches you the moment it drops. Your support keeps these voices alive. Because sometimes, revenge isn't loud, being heard is.